Hey, there's sound now.
Were we muted?
Yeah, we were muted.
Oh my goodness.
Let's start that again. Oh, good, because that first part of it, we were going to talk about like how wrong we were sometimes and how not to tell our wives. We don't have to say that now, so we can just move on.
You just mentioned it again.
Yeah, I know. I did that because the sound was muted the first time and everyone lost the benefit of it.
Mm.
Well, that explains why I saw at least one viewer come on and then leave immediately. All right, we're back. And for the first time, we're finally back. Yeah, we're getting sound now, I hope. If it's not going still, let us know, but I think that you'll find sound now. So, welcome. It's Thursday. It's caucus time. Mason, Ryan, like, share, and subscribe. Go to phyllisschlafly.com and sign up
for our email list.
I think that's where we left it, right?
Yeah.
That's about how far we got.
Big green button on Rumble.
Big green button on Rumble. That's what it will not turn you into the Hulk. That was that action, but it will turn you into a conservative powerhouse of information if you subscribe to us on Rumble. Follow along with these weekly chats. And we were just saying, it has been a week of a lot of stuff. And there's some stuff we wanted to hone in on. If you saw the email, if you're not on the email list, that stinks for you. I'm sorry. But if you saw the email, Gavel Showdown, I wonder what that could be about.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, boy, has it been a showdown that showed down in a very unexpected turn of events within the last hour or so.
Oh my gosh, we can't. This is okay. We wanted to come back. I think last week we talked maybe briefly. We acknowledged the speaker fight that was going on yet again, second time this year. And I don't know if we really got into it. I'm trying to remember exactly what we did or didn't get into last week, because I know we camped out mostly on foreign policy.
Right. We talked briefly about it. We touched on it briefly, but all the action has really gone on over the last 3 days.
Right. And there's a lot to it. And I feel like this is a good topic to understand the full ramifications of. Because I know it seems kind of like congressional insider baseball, inter-party stuff with the GOP, Jim Jordan versus this personality versus Matt Gaetz versus this. I even had someone on the phone with me today who shall remain nameless who said, yeah, Matt Gaetz is just throwing everything into chaos and it's really unhelpful. And I'm like, but is it?
Yeah.
But is it really unhelpful? Because is this a fight that we need to have? And is this just really about the Speaker of the House and the U.S. House of Representatives, or is this representative of something much greater?
Right.
I think that conversation is worth having. And I think it's worth all of us understanding the field of where we are and how all of these things connect. Because again, the biggest problem that I see is a lot of people who get micro-focused on stuff, whether it's something that has to do with COVID and the vaccine. I'm going to just use all the words, the election fraud, things that we're going to get kicked off of YouTube today. They get micro-focused on something and forget to back up and say, wait a minute, where's all this connected? And what else should I worry about? Even if it's not my thing, like my preferred issue, I need to pay attention because all of these things are interlaced together and matter. So what other things do I need to know about and join hands with other people on and fight on this issue politically? I think that we need to make sure we're putting all of those dots together. That's a very powerful thing when you pull the curtain back and understand the whole field of battle, like what we're looking at, not just individual fronts. So I think that this speaker fight, the Gavel Showdown, is really indicative of other things that are going on, and we need to understand all of them together the way that they work. So
right. And even with some upheaval in our government, I mean, politics is a process. Things have to happen, and just as a forest fire is important to keep the forest growing the long term, sometimes there has to be a little bit of chaos and upheaval in the offices of government so that we can uproot deep-seated problems. If it just worked all the time, oh boy, if Congress just worked all the time, we would be in a living nightmare. In some ways, the fact that these people are so struggle so much to do anything directly and cohesively and quickly is a great protection on us, the American people. However,
that was designed that way.
Yeah. However, the one time where I do really want them to get in there and put Jim Jordan into the speaker position so he can start going through the laundry list of all these things that the House has gotten their fingers into, all their cookie jars of ridiculous spending and of, completely irresponsible action in our government. And now this doesn't have to be so hard. And it's really frustrating seeing the Republicans who are, should be backing the Republican nomination for the Speaker of the House not do that. And, because I think that, and we can get into this more throughout the half hour, but they have their own interests and they're fighting for the interests of their lobbyists and their backers and not the they're fighting for the interest of their true constituents. I like
Right.
to say,
Yeah.
because there's their constituents in their districts, the people that voted them into office, but the true constituents of a congressperson, man or woman, or Zer, whatever we have these days, their true constituents are.
I believe their preferred pronouns are bureaucratic and critter.
Yes.
Bureaucrat critters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the true constituents are the military-industrial complex, Lockheed Martin, and Monsanto. I mean, not all of them, but there's a lot of them that is just like they're so intertwined, and it's like, oh, I'm buddy with these defense.
Two more marks under the getting banned from YouTube today
Yeah.
column. We're talking about Roundup. Might as well just throw that phrase in there.
Yeah.
And then the military-industrial complex. There you go.
Yeah.
I tell you what. One of the let me back up. And there have been some interesting conversations around this topic that I've had the last couple of weeks, and it's gone everywhere from conservatives being consistent in their arguments to term limits and stuff like that somehow has come in, because I know a lot of people across the spectrum who okay, so what do you think about this? And I know, and again, a lot of people with whom I agree on all of these primary values of limited government, transparency, getting rid of the bureaucracy that we have in the administrative state, but a lot of people who don't put things together. And for all of us to have the conversations that we're not trying to pigeonhole other people, but we're actually trying to open up our own minds and understand more. Those conversations are always constructive. Sometimes they get heated, but they're always constructive. And I want to run a couple of those by you, because I think that there's some interesting points in there. First of all, on consistency. The very first thing, what I celebrated with glee when Matt Gaetz made the motion to vacate and Kevin McCarthy's gone. I think that again, when they voted Kevin McCarthy through finally as speaker, there was a do these things. Yes, I promise to do these things. Okay, or else. And the or else was a single vote to motion, a single person making the motion to vacate the chair. That's a really big or else. And Matt Gaetz pulled the or else button or cord. He pulled the emergency or else cord in actually following through, because Kevin McCarthy did not follow through on what he said he was going to do. I think that's a reasonable thing to do, and I'm excited about it. It throws the House into chaos. Stuff can't get done. To your point, the gears of government grind slowly. So one of the first things I heard, someone said something about, but that's not consistent. So what are you talking about? And they said, that's not consistent because you hated it you loved it when the Freedom 20 did their thing back in the McCarthy fight, but now you're complaining about these people who won't bend the knee and go for some conservative that they don't like. And I said, well, yes, but I liked what they were doing in January, and I don't like what these people are doing. But I think it's very revealing on both ends. It's not inconsistent. I think that we were standing up for the right thing, and it really showed us, it was revealing that these 20 people are willing to stick to their guns. And now these other people are standing up against people who want to shed the light of transparency on government.
Right.
It's very revealing that these 20 or so people are completely unwilling to do it.
Right.
Now, I wish that they would do the right thing, just like the 20 did the right thing. They were standing up for the right. It's not that procedurally I liked it then, I don't like it now. It's nothing to do with the procedure. It has everything to do with the value behind it.
Right.
What they're doing something for the right reason. Well, this time there are people consistently doing something for the wrong reason, and we're able to tell what that reason is.
Yeah.
Because there's no reasonable reason to be against a Jim Jordan, unless you don't like someone who goes after corruption and waste and wants transparency and things like this. So I heard that come up, and I thought that was a very interesting component of this. As we talk about this, make sure to clarify with people when they say, but wait a minute, didn't you say before? Because we are fraught in America with assumptions about the other person in a political discussion. Oh, well, that means since you like Trump, you must believe X and Y and Z. What? No. Like, we need to be able to very clearly, no, hold on. What I do mean is this. What I don't mean is this. So let's not assume. I noticed that someone immediately was going to well, you're not being consistent. Well, what do you mean by that? It was a very interesting component of this whole thing that, well, there's something we all need to get out in the open and make sure we're good at being able to defend. Like, not defensively, how dare you, but just no, hold on. That's not what I mean. Let's draw these, A and B and C points together and talk about this. I thought that was a very interesting part of this.
Yeah, it's very interesting that somebody would make that objection, because the fact that you were inconsistent with how you want the procedures to go means that you're being consistent in your principles. You want the government to do certain things and not to do certain things. You want their policies to look a certain way, and the path towards those policies looking a certain way might look different here and there. So that strikes me as a very odd objection. That's not really looking at the political process for the dynamic thing that it is, and the fact that you know, yeah, it's an odd objection.
And I think it's people. I would say we are in a time when people want there to be. They want to have a gotcha moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what we've built society and media on, is gotcha moments. We need to be looking less for the gotcha moment and more for the understanding of what someone's saying, and also to make sure that they understand what they're saying, just like we understand the full ramifications of what we're saying. So there's a pro tip number one in this discussion that I've learned from my private discussions about the whole speaker thing this last 3 weeks, 2 weeks. I think it's been very interesting to see that component of it. But I've got some other stuff, but I know that we both kind of brought points to this discussion. That was just one I wanted to drop in, maybe unrelated to the rest of it, but I think that is valuable for us to learn as conservatives, to make sure we're being consistent and to consistently guide conversations, even on a logical level. Like everyone in America needs to go and read basic Lincoln Douglas style debate books to understand like how to make an argument, what fallacies not to fall for, logical fallacies, et cetera, and so on. Because people are just zoop, 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 because they're looking to grab someone in a gotcha moment. It's like, oh, well, hold on. No, but also stop trying to trap someone. Just have the conversation. Well, what do you mean by that? That's interesting.
Yeah.
No one has that first reaction anymore. You're inconsistent.
Right.
What? Anyway, that was an interesting point that I thought was worth bringing up. But
yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't have much to add to it.
I'll move on to point number 2 then.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
No, I know.
Should have open and honest dialogue.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was agreeing. Gwen loves it when we agree. Our coworker wants us to disagree more. I'm like, I guess she wants fisticuffs like the old days of Congress. We throw up the ladder, turn back the clock, like general, beatings every once in a while. Right. I don't know what we're looking for here. No, another interesting thing though. This is, and I'll have this person actually may be watching, so I'm not going to say names, but I had a discussion about term limits, and someone was asking, why do I think it's so great that we turn over the speaker? But I don't support term limits, which I don't. I don't support term limits necessarily. I don't think it's a bad thing inherently, but I think that a lot of people overemphasize it greatly. I don't think term limits fix things. I don't actually think term limits fix hardly anything unless you're turning over staff and the bureaucratic staff and bureaucrats, unelected positions, all of the stuff behind the scenes. You could swap out a congressman and not a whole lot will change, because the staff and the structure and the unelected stuff behind them stays put. Now, if you term limit those things as well, now we're talking. But otherwise, you kick out Nancy Pelosi, they're going to send someone back, probably just as bad, because San Francisco's not wildly off of what she actually does in her voting record. But also, her staff is going to stay behind, her advisors, her fundraiser, her campaign people are probably going to run the new person's campaign. If you don't get rid of those folks, what's the difference? It's a different name, but is the result really that different? Maybe it's a less powerful, influential person than Nancy Pelosi herself, but then we do the same thing on our side. By the time you learn the system, you're kicking out the good guys who get termed out, who we don't want to go, like Tom Massey. I don't want Tom Massey to get termed out, but also, like, what benefit do we get? Are we really actually changing or not? Whereas when you boot the speaker, everything stops. Procedure in the House comes to a standstill until this is taken care of. This actually has a great and significant effect at slowing things down, whereas term limits on Congress really doesn't. So again, there's one more, like someone was, hold on, but you don't support this, but you do support this. Well, let's have that conversation. These are two different things. Again, there's this procedure and that procedure, and to your point of the earlier one, there's procedure and then there's conviction and principles that we base all of our procedures on. Let's have these layers and understand all the layers of the conversation.
Right.
Which again leads me back to, this is a great thing. I think that this turnover is wonderful, but this is connected to not just the House, but all kinds of other stuff, which is I think kind of the part of the conversation we were prepared for today.
Right.
It's just how far the ripples of this go.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things I want to touch on. I mean, I think the discussion of term limits is interesting and kind of opens up the conversation to something you said earlier. If it doesn't make sense why there's these 20 holdouts, or why there were these 20 holdouts against Jim Jordan, like they're not making sense. And actually, I do think what they do makes a lot of sense. I think what they're doing makes a ton of sense from the standpoint of a politician, of somebody in a position of power in society. because I think of bear with me, I'm a Hillsdale econ student, so I'm going to talk about Austrian economics. Hans Hermann Hoppe talked about kind of the economic incentives that come with government in different forms of government. And he highlighted very importantly that when, especially in Democratic or Republican forms of government, when there are shorter terms for people in office, they're going to get in and they're going to be like, okay, I only have this much time, and they're going to seek to enrich themselves. They're going to be, because they're not in there for the long haul. And he draws a contrast with a hereditary monarchy, which is like the opposite extreme of this, where, there's a monarch that's in there for 40 years and he has an interest in building up his kingdom because his son's going to take it over. So it's kind of the difference between a very long outlook versus a very short outlook. And I'm by no means advocating for hereditary monarchy here, but I think it does highlight kind of a dynamic that exists when you have somebody in office for a very short amount of time. And this is why Alexander Hamilton, this is part of why his thinking was that the president of the United States should not be limited so much. Like he argued in favor of 10 to 20 year presidencies. The current president, I mean, he might keel over by the time a 20-year hits, but even if he didn't, that probably wouldn't be so great. But the purpose for that is that so somebody can actually plan ahead and work towards the future. But when we have these when we have these people get into Congress, it's also shaky, kind of, because they could be out in 2 years. They could be out very quickly, so they're going to seek to enrich themselves and increase their power by whatever means necessary. So when somebody comes along and it's like, I'm going to make government more transparent and less corrupt, the opaque or the cloudy and corrupt people are going to be like, no thank you, I like my position of power. So so it's really hard to fault these people. They annoy me, I don't like them, they're our political enemies, but it's hard for me to fault them for being like, no, I want to protect my money and my power, and I want to protect these contracts I have with sending tons of guns to Ukraine. I like those things because they make my life better. So yeah, I don't think it's a, but this also ties to why I think that I'm truly blown away by conservatives over and over again, small government conservatives that stand for the principles of classical liberalism and the founding, because the temptation is so strong to just want to enrich yourself. I mean, it's insane to me that not every single congressperson in the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate is just there to bring more money, and everybody's trying to get these contracts and getting these ties with these lobbyists where they can get these 20-year deals of fighting for Monsanto or Lockheed Martin. The fact that there were 199 conservatives who were actually willing to vote for somebody for Speaker of the House who's going to set an agenda of cutting government spending, it's quite amazing. But I also just think, due to the nature of politics in the long term, I mean, just look at the way government has grown. It's a very hard position to take and a very, very hard one to win, as we have seen clearly. But it's a principled one. It's a brave one. It's one that's actually standing for what is right rather than just what enriches you. So.
And that's a really interesting point. Which, first of all, you tipped on it a little bit there. I see someone in the Rumble chat over here is asking why, do we know what some of the reasoning is for not voting for Jim Jordan? I think that Tom Massey put it best about 6 hours ago. He tweeted or X'd, whatever, posted on X. I think we've finally adopted posted on X. The retweet button is gone. Even it says repost now. I'm not bitter. Tom Massey posts on X 6 hours ago. He says, I have taken thousands of votes during my time in Congress. No roll call has been as clarifying as the one for Jim Jordan as Speaker. Why isn't his election easy here? Because his leadership represents a credible threat to the unchecked growth of our bloated federal government. That's it.
Yeah.
That Jim Jordan represents that, and a darn good version of it too, because unlike Matt Gaetz, who has a little bit of a hothead troublemaker personality that follows him, Jim Jordan really doesn't. Now the left would like to portray him as, Hitler. They try to portray everybody as Hitler, who they don't like. But Jim Jordan has always been calm, cool, collected, and very effective. A very effective weapon of slicing government down to size. I love that, like, the left has, by the way, someone pointed out this morning on Twitter, I'd just like to officially announce that Hakeem Jeffries has officially lost speaker votes for 17 votes in a row. His 17th vote in a row for speaker. I thought that was funny. But during all of these nomination speeches this week, or I guess 2 of them, they liked to point out, Jim Jordan has never passed a single bill. He's never had a single bill go to committee. And I'm in the background as a limited government guy going, yes, someone who is not adding to government.
Right, because what's just in those bills?
It's amazing. Wow, someone who's tried to get rid of stuff instead of add stuff. I love this guy.
Right.
That's why. I mean, it boils down to that. But the point, what I was going to say, Jordan is the chemo to government growth. I like that. That's good. You're on Rumble too. You're seeing this is good. I think that this is pretty clarifying, though, because when you think about it, the dynamics, to your point, I'm excited that 199, 200 people decided to vote for this. Jim Jordan is no slouch on the conservative / government, put it back in its place, back inside the box, the chains of the Constitution it ought to be in. It only took 20 people standing on principle, and some good ones weren't even there, like Jim Jordan, Tom Massey, people who I trust to stand on principle were, tactically speaking, on the McCarthy side of the votes last January. But it only took 20 to bring everything to a standstill and demand something different. And they won to an extent. Now, again, they ended up going for McCarthy or else, and now we've pulled the or else lever. So here we are again. But look, 200 of our Republican majority of what, 222? Is it 222?
I think so.
222 Republicans. 200 of them, 199, are willing to go along with something that I think is very good, very acceptable, more than acceptable. There's really only about 20 or 22 of them that won't. Only 20 or 22 are so adamantly pro-system, pro-establishment that they will not bend the knee even now once for this one thing because they know I'm not going to go down this road. It's really actually not that many of the Congress critters. That's what one of our old coworkers here used to call them, Congress critters. It's not that many of them that will principally stand against the people and for the system so blatantly. It's really a small number. The rest of them can kind of be moved this direction and that when they have good and powerful leadership who say, no, we're going to do it this way. And you're standing on the right things. That actually is kind of encouraging. Out of all these people who are kind of self-enriching, on the system themselves, they can be moved still. That I'm willing to take as an encouraging factor. There's really only about 20 who will say, no way, under no circumstances, I will Liz Cheney myself into oblivion kind of thing. Like that's what we're seeing with 22 of these guys. And some of them I think are actually already facing some stiff primaries. Tony Gonzalez has a big pro-flashy Second Amendment guy who's running against him. There's a lot of, I don't know where Brian Fitzpatrick fell on this one. I don't think he was one of the 20 or 22. Anyway, there's some interesting ones, and they already have some interesting primaries, but I think this is very revealing and actually kind of encouraging that there's really only 20 at the end of the day who are willing to be against something so popular as Jim Jordan, whose national numbers are really good, except for the media. So that's very interesting.
So look up who these 20 congressmen were that stood for the system against the American people. Check if they're in your district, if these are your congressmen that are supposed to be representing you. And, people always talk about calling your congressman, you might as well. These people are out for their own ends, so they might not care, but you could at least just, let the poor intern that's staffing in their office have it. Or send a strongly worded letter. But most importantly, you need to look at the coming primaries and see if we can get a better small government, capital C conservative to take their seat in the House. And if there's not, hey, anybody can run for office in the United States of America. So if there's not, you should maybe even consider it yourself. Even though that's a huge undertaking, it's more important that we fight for freedom and we fight for the principles of the founding and what America is all about, which is small government and by the people for the people. We as the people need to take a stand, even if it's uncomfortable, and get rid of these parasites. These people are parasites. They're critters. The congressional critters. I love it.
Congress critters. You remember the old politics, many blood-sucking creatures. It's It's not just a T-shirt; it's kind of apt. I would say one more thing on this, though. I think that this 22, and by the way, let me make abundantly clear. I know we didn't address this to begin with, but Jim Jordan has currently suspended his bid for Speaker of the House and backed Patrick McHenry, the guy who has been the temp speaker this whole time. Patrick McHenry is not a good solution. I don't believe that he represents anything remotely close to what Jim Jordan's values are. Now, again, I don't fault Jim Jordan or anyone else for saying it's time to go that direction.
And he's not saying he's done either.
No, not at all. And again, there is a balance here of principles and strategy. I'm fully on board with that, but I don't think McHenry is a good, in my opinion, personally, a good long-term solution, because that's like doing I saw someone that's tantamount to a continuing resolution instead of a budget. Like this is just kicking the can down the road, doing the same thing we've always done. And I think that's what McHenry would be, is just doing the same thing. He would be, sending money to Ukraine and this and that and the other, and all. There's no significant change, which is the potential that we would have with Jordan. But one of the points I wanted to make, though, and bring up, there's other stuff that has happened in the news this week. I know that the Georgia stuff has been spinning up. Sidney Powell is in the news today.
Oh, there was an insurrection yesterday.
Where was the insurrection?
At the U.S. Capitol.
At the U.S. Capitol.
Did you not hear about this?
No, I missed this.
I was as blown away as you're probably feeling right now. Last night,
it must have been leftists, though, because I didn't hear anything about it. It wasn't on the news.
I have a friend who lives in D.C. and he was like, "Did you hear about the Capitol riot today?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm googling, and it's just J6 this, J6 that. Remembering J6. It took me like 7 Google searches until I could find. But look at this.
She needs DuckDuckGo.
300 pro-Palestinian protesters demand ceasefire at Capitol. At least 3 allegedly assault cops. And if this is the first you're hearing about this,
this is the first I'm hearing about this.
Yeah, it's.
I'm not surprised to be looking at the New York Post banner either, but that's the first. I didn't just need to open the New York Post every day.
Right.
This is just lesson to the. There you go. Word of the wise. Yeah, open the New York Post, because they'll talk about stuff others won't.
Yeah, I mean this is a big deal, because this is kind of a this is an opportunity for Republicans to do to these insane people what the Democrats and what the government system has been doing to the January 6th protesters, which I think is so funny that people describe the left described the 2020 BLM riots as mostly peaceful, but the J6 protest was literally mostly peaceful. But this was not. I mean, 3 allegedly assault police officers, and you see the videos, and these people are screaming, going crazy. Marjorie Taylor Greene had, she was taking videos. She was out there in the protest taking videos of people.
That figures.
Finding and people screenshotted her video, being able to see people's phone screens and their group chats, and like figuring out who's involved with this. But one of the main group chats for organizing this was called like. I forget what the word is. It's a Arabic word, but it's like global enchilada. Infatada. Something. Yeah, it's something.
I want to say frittata, but I know that that's a breakfast dish. It's nothing to do with this.
Which that was like a global the first enchilada, whatever it's called, was a plan by Muslims in the Middle East to eradicate the people of Israel.
We'd like to thank you for joining today's foreign policy moment on Islam with obviously your very knowledgeable hosts, Mason. Right now.
What's it called?
Intifada.
Yeah. So their group chat for coordinating this was called Global Intifada.
Well, and the first Intifada, here's your we're using Wikipedia, so take this with a grain of salt, but it's the first thing that pulls up. The first Intifada was the first Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation from 1987 to 1993. That's what that's a reference to. So Intifada, I guess, very specifically is a Palestinian jihad against Israel specifically. It's not just jihad, but that conflict specifically. So
So there were 300 people that were literally pro-Hamas, which the United States government designates as a terrorist organization. 300 pro-Hamas people bursting into the Capitol. They've all been arrested, obviously, but as you would hope. But there's no media touching on it. You can only find it's kind of the new mainstream, the whole like conservative podcast and like live stream sphere. That's kind of the new mainstream. The real mainstream media is picking up on it. The conservatives, the good guys. but the legacy media, the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, they're not talking about this. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like it's going to be interesting to kind of see what the reaction of this is going into the future, and how this applies to the ongoing J6 persecution, and the ways if conservatives, if the Republicans in our government, which I don't think they will. I have very little faith in them, even though I praised them for being so principled earlier. I still have very little faith in most of their ability to get anything done whatsoever. But I mean, this is a golden opportunity to strike back the left in the same way that they've been striking at us for years. It was the one Congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib, kicked this whole thing off. And that's what they're going after Trump for years later for, kicking off the J6 riot, protest, insurrection. It's like these are people coming in. It's absurd. So a terrorist organization from a different country across the globe launches a first strike attack on America's #1 ally, and then then there's their advocates running into the U.S. Capitol. Like this is insane. This is actually insane. It's hard to comprehend. And the left is obviously going to be hypocritical about this, but and everybody knows that, and there's not even much point in reminding people of that. So it's what are we gonna do? Well, we got to get rid of these people. They've been arrested. Are they gonna spend 2 years in solitary confinement each?
Of course not. No. Of course not, because it's a pro refugee movement.
Is Rashida Tlaib going to be put through the ringer of lawsuits and indictments and gag orders and everything that President Trump has gone through? I don't think so. But she should. The people in our government, the people that are supposed to be representing us, the people on the right, the conservatives, the Republicans, this is a golden opportunity for you to use the power that the left has opened up out of our government. They've set the new tone for powers that are allowed by persecuting your political enemies. Okay, it's time for Republicans to persecute their political enemies, because they're asking for it. They're literally asking for it.
And I mean, to your point, this is and this goes across the point that I was going to make. Dignified or verifying the big lie, and see that's an interesting point here, that it dignifies their lie or verifies their lie. That's an interesting point, but I'd say to Mason's point, and I agree on this one. I would just go back to the very old, very common adage: fight fire with fire. If this is the tactic that they've chosen, you don't want to be that person who just nickels and dimes and brings up every little thing and demands, well, if we're being consistent, like you don't want to be the nagging, voice in the room. But at the same time, if you say, wait a minute, if we're going to be consistent, you must also recognize this. And I think this is really not to the benefit of the people who framed the whole January 6th thing as an insurrection. Those people don't care. They're liars. The establishment powers that be, the elites that have put that narrative into the American people's minds, those people don't care about consistency. They're lying. But for all the people out there who have bought the lie, who drank the Kool-Aid, and who actually listened to the news and thought that January 6th was some sort of insurrection or attempt to overthrow the government, as ridiculous as that is, for those of us who know, this is the opportunity to say, wait a minute, but what about this? And when you start looking at it, it's a foot in the door moment to have a conversation and to get people to understand, to think outside the narrative. I think that's the real goal here, to use this moment. I mean, it is to persecute and slow down your political enemies. I hate to say persecute, but I mean, if they're going to try to gum up the works and throw everything at conservatives, we need to, kind of like I said, fight fire with fire, throw ethics complaints back at them, throw this, throw that, gum up the works so that it at least grinds the gears of their machine of political warfare. But in this regard, this is a real entry point into opening the discussion with other people, to get them to open their mind and say, wait a minute, let's consider this. Yeah, why aren't they calling this out? Why isn't this the same thing to these people who I've believed this whole time that January 6th was a something? Why isn't this a something too? Now you have the opportunity to talk to them about, they're lying to you. They don't actually think that it was an insurrection. That was a bit. That was a ruse, a charade to get what they wanted, to persecute their political enemies and quite literally throw them in jail from the top down, from Trump all the way to the Trump voters. you need to understand this. I think this could be an eye-opening moment for some people. You might have an opportunity to use this. So to the point, and obviously be cautious with it. I agree. Velveteen Rabbit is taking up the Rumble chat to make sure that I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. It's a valid point though. Be cautious, but I think that's his point. You've got an opportunity here to not only try to gum up their machine, but to talk to people. So you're not having to legitimize the January 6th events from their narrative's perspective in order to call this, like, to ask the question, to pose it to people. Are we not going to be consistent about this? If you think the January 6th, what about this? What about October 18th? Like, that's a very legitimate question to put out there. And I think that to the point of our discussion about the House, if you look at the mushy people in the middle who are willing to go for Jim Jordan, who I would have called really establishment figures, I think that that's a representative of the American public too. A lot of people have gone this direction and bought the line about J6. But if you actually have an opportunity to make a discussion open up with them, this could be that. I think you get a lot of people to go, wait a minute, maybe they're not telling me the truth. Maybe I am being lied to. So I think that's a golden opportunity, in that sense.
Yeah, there's something I think is very important that I want to highlight here, because there's something you hear a lot, especially from all of the scholars of liberalism throughout the centuries, and you hear it a lot from classically liberal conservatives and a lot of libertarians today, and they talk about why restrictions and checks and balances on the power of government is important, why constitutionalism is important, and why you shouldn't just use whatever power that is possible in the world to get towards your political ends, because they say, if you go past the limits of power in that way, that opens the door for your enemies to start using the power in the same way against you. Now, what's been going on for the last half a decade is, and probably even longer, but it's especially clear in the last few years, is that the left has gone past their constitutional limits and opened up the domain of political possibility to new moves against their enemies. And so it's not a matter of, if we use this power, it gives our enemies the opportunity to use so. Our enemies are already using this power against us. They've created a new weapon. And if you're on a battlefield and there's a weapon lying there for you to use, you can't just be like, I'm not going to use that because I have these, because we started this battle with the restriction of banning this weapon. And it's like, no, you have to meet your enemy where they are. You have to use the same tools that they are going to use if you're going to defeat them. And if you're going to decide that you're not going to do that for whatever reason, you might be able to claim that you have the moral high ground and are more constitutionalist and have more integrity, but at the same time you are going to lose. If the left is going to open up new domains of political possibility, the right has to use that against them as well.
And I agree with you. And I understand, though, I mean, at the point of, I think what's being, which, by the way, we've persuaded Velveteen Rabbit.
Right. Well, this is for everybody else in the world.
It's for everyone else. But to your point, I understand where this gets dicey, because as I listen to you and I agree with you, I see the return point that often comes from people is that, but do you sacrifice your principles and your morals and your et cetera and so on? No, that's not what we're advocating for when we talk about using weapons of war. But listen, there is a difference. In polite society, in under peacetime, there are different norms and different things that are or aren't acceptable than under times of war. And it is a dictation not of what we want, but of what is necessary. So obviously this is political warfare currently. I mean, in other parts of the world, it's outright warfare. But in these times, there is we will return to these, it's not that we're abandoning these values, but some things get suspended. And it's not necessarily a suspension of your morals and of your values, but this is why these conversations are so important, because it is so incredibly difficult to wade through all of this, to make these considerations, to do what needs to be done, but to hold to what you believe is true. This is not just easy. It is not always black and white, especially in the conversations we're having right now about the survival of our republic. Absolute truth exists, and absolute truth is, as we have to apply it to our broken lives, not always black and white to figure out immediately. You have to dive in and find where it is. So of course, we're not just saying suspend whatever and do whatever. Anything
Mhm.
goes because it's out there and someone else has done it. Don't hear us saying that. It's not what he's saying either, I don't think.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
He is very non-committal to my, like, I'm not going to talk about that, but man, I don't believe it. Anyway, no, but like, just to understand, these are much more difficult conversations, and we need to be having them and be down in the middle of them. So I understand, I think we understand what maybe some of the pause and concern are, but also listen to, this is a little bit of a different time than just normal.
Right.
So this is why, what is it? This is why women need men. If the weapon is lying there, that doesn't mean, well, I think you said laying instead of lying there. So your grammar is being attacked, and so is your honor. But your grammar was wrong. I wasn't paying attention. I think that's what we're going after here. Anyway, we'll talk. Your wife's a teacher. We'll talk about that later. I'm sure you'll hear. I'll show her this. I'll send her the link. Don't worry about it. But that's really it. I mean, we've gone on for a long time here. The only thing I was going to say, I was just going to talk about, when you look at Georgia, when you look about some of the election stuff that's going on, whether it's Sidney Powell, Donald Trump, all of these, the perversion of the justice system, the perversion of the justice system as it's being used against January 6 prisoners being held in DC and across the country. All of this ties into the fight over the House Speaker's gavel that we're watching right now. It is the faction of we the powerful versus we the people. That's what this is. Make no mistake, it's the same fight across several different fronts. It is the same enemy that we face, and the same fight for liberty and for limited government and for restrained civil society. This is all the same war in different fronts. So just as important as it is that we not just bend over and let whoever, take over the speakership, is super important that we stand up for the Donald Trumps and the Sidney Powells to not be abused. Is just as important as we stand up for the January 6 defendants. All of these things are interconnected. They are. And we must understand that and apply our work across all of these different fields. It doesn't mean we don't have specialties. I am here now. We'll go here later. But I think that we need to understand, nuance. That's, man, this whole conversation is cloaked in nuance.
Yeah.
But that is the point that I wanted to draw. That this speaker fight matters. It's not just inside baseball in Congress. This is the same fight that is going on in Georgia. This is the same fight that's going on in DC courts. This is the same fight that's going on across the country in different places. And it's the same value that is being fought in California when they fight their own state government. It's all of these principles. This is the same thing. It's we the people versus we the powerful. These are the two sides that are being set up.
Right.
And I think that we would do well to continue to remind us and each other of that at every opportunity. We can't forsake one of these things and call it different. This is really all the same thing. It's just different parts of the same, battle that's going on, or different battles of the same war that's going on.
Right.
So that's the point that I wanted to drive home here at the end of it. Not going after us. They're appreciating us both. They appreciate us and our nuanced discussions.
Well, we feel appreciated.
I do.
And we feel appreciated by every person that tunes in every week or every other week or as often as they can.
Yeah.
To join in on our conversation, whether you're just listening or whether you're typing along and commenting on us. We appreciate all of you very much. I think that's something that is very important to remind our listeners and our viewers that, you guys are what you guys and gals are what we do.
We're Midwesterners. We can say guys for everything.
I say y'all. I'm from Texas. Y'all are why we get up here every week and share what we're thinking, because we value having all of you here to listen to us and to join in on our conversations.
Yeah, because this happens the other 4 days of the week that we're sitting in the office, but we turn on the camera one time a week at least, because this is valuable for everyone. So jump in there, participate. What we want, here's the goal. Okay, before Christmas, I want the comments section, particularly on Rumble, I want the comments section to be like the Wild West. Okay, this is the goal for everyone. So you need to go and identify one person to jump in with us. Spend these 30 or 40 minutes with us every Thursday, if they can, over the lunch hour, and get into the comments and start talking. Because as you see, we read, we respond. Like this is a discussion to us. It's no fun. If it's just two of us, this is dumb. Like we would just go do this over in our offices, not here. So go and get one person. Wild West in the comments, people. That's what we want. And until then, go to phyllisschlafly.com. Sign up for the emails. Wherever you are, like, share, and subscribe helps us in the algorithms, especially commenting in chat. Those two things are very helpful to boost this and put it in front of other people at the suggestion of YouTube and Rumble. And then you won't get the email today if you don't go sign up for the email address or the email list. So, because we've got a lot of links. Brad, we were just talking about how many tabs we have open before we started this thing. So, you went in on the tab enrichment here of all of our links. Go sign up.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think that's it. We'll see you all next week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Have a good week, everybody.